In this lesson, we're going to move into the next step of our LBO model here, which is to create a sources and uses schedule. Now, the basic idea behind a sources and uses schedule is to show where the money is coming from and then where the money is going to. Now, you might wonder why exactly we need this, because up above in our transaction assumptions, we already have much of this laid out. We already have the debt required, the equity required right here. We have our equity purchase price. So why is it that we need this schedule on top of everything else that we already have? The answer is because the schedule that we created above for our transaction assumptions is not 100% accurate. And what I mean by that, going back to our house analogy, is that there are often hidden fees associated with buying a house. So for example, when you buy it, you will have to pay a broker's fee if you've gone through a real estate broker. You might have to pay the bank some kind of bank fee for taking out a mortgage. You might have to pay a homeowner's fee depending on what region you're living in. And so there are many fees associated with buying a house for the first time. And so if you just look at how much cash you're putting down, the down payment, and the amount of debt you're taking on the mortgage, oftentimes the down payment plus the mortgage is not enough. And so you need extra funds to cover these hidden fees, these extra fees associated with actually making the purchase of the house or the company. Now in this case, these hidden fees are really referring to the advisory fees and financing fees, and the effect of both of these will be to require more capital from the private equity firm here. So because of the fact that it's not just the equity value of the company and the fact that we're raising a fixed amount of debt, the investors, the private equity firm, are going to have to put down more cash in this case. So I'm just going to delete this explanation and go back to the sources and uses. So to begin filling this out, we can just link in the bank debt and high yield debt to start with. So the bank debt is just the 79 billion number right up here. The high yield debt is the 26 or 27 billion number right here. For the investor equity, we're going to leave this one blank and come back to it because this calculation is not immediately obvious what you have to do. For the equity value of the company, we can just go up to our transaction assumptions where we've defined it right here. For the advisory fees, what we want to do is take this 0.02% number that we've defined and then multiply it by the equity purchase price. So we're assuming here that Apple or the private equity firm are going to be paying out around 43 million in advisory fees to the bank for the M&A advisory services, to lawyers, to accountants, to all other parties that are involved with making this transaction actually happen. Then for the financing fees, what we want to do is go up and link to the 0.06% right here. But instead of linking to the equity purchase price, we're going to link to the debt required number right here. Because remember, the fees on the debt financing are higher, but the debt required is lower, much lower than the equity purchase price. And we only want to be charging fees on the debt that we actually raise. So the debt financing fees are never charged on the entire price of the company, but rather only on the amount of debt that you're raising to buy the company. So we have 64 million in financing fees, 43 million in advisory fees. Not uncommon to see numbers like this. Oftentimes in LBOs, the financing fees are significantly higher than the advisory fees just because of what I just spoke about now, that the percentage is always going to be higher and the amount of debt might be lower than the equity purchase price, but often the percentage is so much higher that it makes up for having a lower balance in the first place. For the total uses, we're just going to sum these up. So we have 212.8 billion here. And now for the investor equity. So if you think about this, under normal circumstances, if we did not have the advisory and financing fees right here, we could just say that the equity required up here, the equity used up here, is simply equal to the investor equity. But what we have to do instead to figure out how much cash the investors have to contribute is we're going to take our total uses right here and then subtract our sources so far. So in this case, we have these two tranches of debt. If we are using other forms of financing, so if we had preferred stock, if we had convertible bonds, if we had other types of financing, we would subtract those as well when making this calculation. So we're taking our total uses the amount of money that's required, and then subtracting how much we have so far to figure out how much these investors are actually contributing in cash toward buying this company. So we have that. And now I'm just going to sum these up, and we see that our total sources, 212.8 billion, matches with our total uses, 212.8 billion. And this is how we know that our sources and uses is working correctly. If we wanted to be even more thorough and we had a more complex schedule, we could go in and play around with the numbers and test out different scenarios. But for right now, this is fine. This is a very simple schedule and it already balances. So we can conclude that our work here is correct. With that done, we now have all the basic assumptions and all the schedules we're going to need to complete our leverage buyout model here. The next step of this process is to get started with actually projecting Apple's income statement and other financial statements and making some of the assumptions that we're going to need to project those. And you'll see how in this next part, many of these will be based off of the existing work that we have. We will diverge from it in a few spots, but much of it is going to be based on all the existing work we did on creating Apple's 3 statements in the first place. So coming up in the next video, you're going to see exactly that, how we're going to leverage our existing work and then how we're going to modify it in some parts to support this LBO model.